As the Turkish government toughens its crackdown on the opposition, the European Parliament says the EU should suspend membership talks. Saving the Paris Climate Accord. Despite the election of U.S. President Donald Trump, MEPs back the global pact as a growth engine. The EU-Canada Free Trade Accord, CETA. Parliament rejects a new attempt to derail its ratification. And combating violence against women and girls, a Parliament resolution pressing all of the EU to join a global convention to try the perpetrators. Hello and welcome to our roundup of the European Parliament's latest plenary session here in Strasbourg. We begin with an extraordinary press conference in which EPP Group Chairman Manfred Weber announced the group will present its candidate for the top job of the European Parliament. Weber also said major political groups will seek agreement on who should be the next Parliament president that can maintain stability. But first he paid tribute to the outgoing Parliament President Martin Schulz, who announced he'll run in German elections next September.
The big achievement of Martin Schulz's work was to guarantee stability in the institution. The European Parliament delivered during the last years in the interest of the people of the European Union, and now it's up to us to continue on this path, and the EPP is ready to do so. Together we are strong.
Now to Turkey, where the government there has rounded up tens of thousands of opponents after a coup attempt. Parliament approved a resolution that calls for a temporary freeze on Turkey's accession talks with the EU, unless the government of President Recep Erdogan respects rule of law and halts the crackdown. The purge after the attempted coup in July has expanded to more than 100,000 fired and at least 37,000 people detained, including politicians, academics, and journalists. Weber says because of the crackdown, Europe needs to freeze EU accession talks with Turkey, that business as usual would undermine the pro-democratic opposition in Turkey.
Europe has to act. Europe has to give a clear signal. We don't accept this. It's that you are taking our common value base into account, into question. And this means for us very concretely we have to suspend, we have to freeze the current negotiation talks with Turkey. With a country which is currently in such a situation, we cannot talk about an enlargement process.
Next, the Paris Climate Accord. Uncertainty reigns after the election of Donald Trump as the next U.S. president. The European Parliament is sending a signal that no matter what happens in Washington, the EU will still actively back the agreement to slash greenhouse gases. In Marrakesh, climate officials, policymakers, and activists the world over discussed this month how to put into action the accord reached in Paris last December to limit global warming to 2 degrees Celsius or face climate disaster. With a dozen MEPs attending, the EU aimed to demonstrate its commitment to the accord, regardless of what a Trump administration does after it takes office on 20 January. Giovanni Lavia of the EPP Group headed the delegation to COP22, or the 22nd round of the Conference of the Parties on Climate Change. He sees a tough task ahead, with the need to make national plans more ambitious.
It is clear that with the actual national plan, we are not going to achieve the final result at the end of the century. We have to increase our commitment.
We shift to another international accord, the EU-Canada trade agreement called CETA. Once again, an effort to scrap it, this time by getting the European Court to rule on whether it complies with European law. Parliament rejected the motion that would have asked the European Court for a binding opinion. The question for the court, whether the comprehensive economic and trade agreement with Canada is in line with the right of governments to regulate on health, safety, or the environment. Last June, Parliament's own legal service found no contradiction. Artis Pabriks is the EPP Group's spokesman on trade.
European Union, if we want to survive, if we want really to embrace the change and guarantee some kind of development and jobs and prosperity for our people, we should embrace this change with active policy. We should ratify CETA, and moreover, we should go very fast forward with the next trade agreements with countries like Japan, Vietnam, because that region is also waiting for this. So CETA is some kind of a door. If we open this door, then there is a chance that European Union can get a second breath.
Finally, the World Day to Eliminate Violence Against Women takes place this week. 16 years after a UN resolution calling for action to do that, the abuses continue across the world and government action is lacking. MEPs want to re-energize that effort. Parliament approved a resolution calling on all EU member states to ratify the so-called Istanbul Convention. It is the first legally binding instrument to combat violence against women. Only half the EU member states have ratified it so far. Anna Maria Corazza-Bildt is the EPP Group's vice coordinator on women's rights and gender equality.
Well, it's time that we recognize that violence against women is not a private issue. It is a crime, and it's widespread in the European Union. So the EPP Group is driving a line of zero-tolerance policy against impunity. And we have to join forces in all the member states, cross-political groups, to build a culture of respect, of dignity of women and girls, and to combat the stereotypes at home, in public spaces, and more in the social media.
The resolution in Parliament sends a strong signal to the European Council to get the entire EU to ratify the Istanbul Convention. That would in turn mean stronger EU laws, programs, and more funding to enforce it. That's it from Strasbourg. See you next week in Brussels. And find out more about the activities of the largest political force in Parliament by checking eppgroup.eu. Thanks for watching.